Hello there, Commonwealth from here. There's one thing you cannot do with Ocarina of Time, and that is mess up the very beginning. After pressing start and seeing that iconic cutscene of the threat that is ahead, Link waking up and getting his companion, Navi, into Kokiri Forest and meeting up with his best friend, Zreo. Do you feel like anything can really change in Kokiri Forest, so the opening area of Ocarina of Time with a remake, Joey?
That's the thing, right? There's not even any loading screens in this area. It's all pretty seamless. So yeah, I really don't think anything can change except the visuals, of course, this being a remake. And you know, that's kind of what Kokiri Forest also served as in the original Nintendo 64 release, just showing off, hey, this is Zelda in 3D for the very first time. This is what we can do. You're seeing the entire place from Navi's perspective, and this can basically be just a retreading of that, you know? Here's the game you remember, but now in fully 4K. Other than that, there's really nothing else you need to change except, you know, just maybe look around Link's little house for a bit now that it doesn't need to be a matte painting or anything.
This is one of the things about the opening of Ocarina of Time. It really sets the tone immediately of how organic this experience is going to be. And that is one thing also that we sensed kind of a little bit in Breath of the Wild, but I feel like Ocarina of Time did an even better job here by introducing you the Z-targeting and also with a very simple and quick opening when you think about it. You go out there, you get that sword, the Kokiri sword, and then you collect enough rupees to buy the shield so you can get past Mido and go your way up to the Great Deku Tree. But one thing I feel like they could change is obviously focusing more on vistas, because you're gonna have probably full camera control, since Ocarina of Time is the final 3D Zelda game to not have that dual analog camera controls. And the best way to do it, also when it comes to a demo, because if there is a demo, it is very likely that it's going to be Kokiri Forest and the Deku Tree, but also showing that this is a respectful remake, one that adds elements here and there, but I don't think it's going to happen right away in Kokiri Forest. I think the structure that is there, the objectives will be the same, and any changes that will be applied to Kokiri Forest will be tied more to when you return as an adult. We'll get back to that a little bit later in this video, because one thing that this remake can do, Joey, is restoring cut content. And one of those cut contents, apart from the flying R-Wing from Star Fox, was the ability to be in control of Navi flying around. That could be an interesting way to, you know, see this place from a different perspective, but at the same time not change anything about the iconic starting location.
Right, that's another way to sneak in photo mode as well, because you're going to want to take a lot of photos in this game. You know, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom had its own photo mode, but it was locked to the tablets in those games, the Sheikah Slate and Zelda's camera, making Navi be like that gateway between to like make the photo mode happen. And especially because Nintendo's going to want to show off how great this game looks. They're going to be like, you see that thing over there? You can't really see it. Well, now you can go into Navi's perspective and see it for yourself. Bring back the R-Wing though. Does it make sense? No, but I don't care. This is Nintendo. Throw in some Pikmin while you're at it.
Speaking of Navi, it would be very interesting if we could fly around, you know, the Great Deku Tree, since I doubt Link will be able to climb the first dungeon inside the Great Deku Tree. And one of the things that have been a little bit controversial, also that I've seen in some comment sections, both in our videos and some other videos, is that they should change the dungeons of Ocarina of Time so that I can experience it for the first time again. But I don't think that is a really good idea, because it could really mess with one thing that is so important for Ocarina of Time, namely the pacing.
You don't mess with dungeon design in Zelda games unless it's a sequel, because I know A Link Between Worlds shares the exact same map as A Link to the Past. Almost the exact same, but the dungeons are completely different. That's because it's not a remake. But when you're doing a remake or a remaster, you really just don't mess with the dungeon design unless it's like little changes. Like I remember discussing this game back at Game Explain for Ocarina of Time's 25th anniversary. Going back to it can be a little jarring how sometimes the fire doesn't interact with the torches like it should. At times it doesn't really make sense, but like I feel like that's kind of the consequence of having like an extremely linear dungeon, is that you have to do things like in a very specific order. I know there are some loading screens between some rooms, especially when you hit mini bosses, so I feel like that's like the only thing they can do is just improve like the seamlessness of that part.
No, especially not the Great Decatry, where everything is so organic, where you have the Decus, where you have the iconic first boss in Goma. It is just so well structured. Kokiri Forest, it doesn't take very long until you're able to get to the first dungeon. I think it's probably in the Zelda series one of the fastest from start to first dungeon experiences. It stands in great contrast to, say, the likes of Majora's Mask. Even the Wind Waker, I'm not even going to talk about Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword. Same in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. And I feel like they should not mess that up. It is an area where you start and right there is the starting dungeon. It should remain the same. We should have that story beat, of the threat of Ganondorf and learning about what he did and what threat he poses before the Great Decatry sends you out to Hyrule Field, and you have that crucial encounter with Saria, who hands her ocarina to you.
Because a remake is something rebuilt from the ground up, but there's two different ways to go about it, like the Final Fantasy VII Remake way, which I think we both agree that they just can't do in this case. Otherwise, it's just not even Ocarina of Time at that point. So the real thing they can really change are the visuals, are like the processing power. Maybe another thing if they could do for Kokiri Forest and just the rest of the game in general is like make it so the buildings don't even have loading screens. Kind of just making things more streamlined is like the best thing they can do to make Ocarina of Time a more like, I don't know, user-friendly, accessible kind of experience. Also, maybe give the Great Decatry a better face. Although, like, that kind of runs into the problem of, like, his mouth is gonna open and then it enters and it just kind of looks jarring because he used that mouth to talk.
Oh, you mean the moon from Majora's Mask 3D?
Yes, exactly that.
What we also have to remember about Kokiri Forest before you go to Hyrule Field is that it has multiple additional areas that it connects to, especially Lost Woods. And it is the fact that you have those areas that you also return to back in the child section and also then in the adult section as you make your way slowly but surely towards both the Dodongo's Cavern and the child section and then towards the Forest Temple in the adult section. It means that if you want to apply changes to Kokiri Forest, you can apply them later on, not in the very beginning, but say either when you have to return here to learn Saria's song, or when you have the time skip and return here on the path to the Forest Temple. Chronologically, First Temple, we don't know exactly if Nintendo is going, or whoever is making this remake, could be Monolith Soft, will allow us to, start with the Fire Temple, for example, instead of the Forest Temple. We know that everything is item-based here, so we'll have to return back to the Forest Temple and that topic of adult era Kokiri Forest, say for example entering it on Epona. Instead, let's focus on as Link leaves out to Hyrule Field, that massive opening. And back in 1998, this was a massive space. It isn't that much any longer, let's put it that way. You have, of course, the grottos, you have Lon Lon Ranch, which becomes more important after entering Castletown, the horror of Hyrule Field, namely the P-Hat. Yes, you should be making your way to Hyrule Castle, but there should be that, maybe it can break the linearity a little bit, that instead of going inside of there or getting locked out and have to fight the stall enemies, you instead end up going south, for example, and enter, I don't know, a little small farm or a new small village.
They really could just make Hyrule Field bigger. Way bigger. Maybe not Breath of the Wild big, but they could mess with the size of that area, include like activities that are focused like in that section and that doesn't carry over into any other section at all. And I feel like that's probably something they could totally get away with in making it more expansive. Link going out into that area like he went out into the Great Plateau for the first time, where the camera pans out as he runs out, and then there's Hyrule Field, and it's this new, much more massive area with more things to do. And that's kind of how they Breath of the Wild-fy. They add the open air to this game, is making Hyrule Field like that designated section. I feel like that's probably the best way they can get away with changing the game like to a greater extent than just the visuals.
It's a great way of showing how well this game will also be running, because big open space, and also the fact that Hyrule Field has still not been shown truly alive in 3D Zelda, because both in Breath of the Wild and in Tears of the Kingdom, everything south of Lookout Landing down to the Great Plateau was pretty much empty. There was ruins, it was just enemies, while here's a chance to add something more to it. Of course, we have Lon Lon Ranch already, which is more than pretty much every other 3D Zelda game when it comes to Hyrule Field, but I feel like there's room for a little bit more. Of course, London Ranch is going to remain pretty much the same as it is, having its little child section with Epona's song, and then of course gaining Epona and doing the races in the adult section. But that is a topic we'll get back to as we continue through this journey of Inside Ocarina of Time Remake. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and press the notification bell. Last but not least, a big thanks to you for watching, and to all of our patreon.com/commonrealm patrons. Special shoutouts go to our heroes, Cheryl, Garrett Hoy, Holly Wolf, and Kintar. You rock, and please enjoy these awesome videos.